Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive.
Hey there.
Today, we're plunging into some source material that offers, well, a very specific and forceful perspective on immigration, law, and the government's role.
Yeah, it's excerpts from a speech, Janine Pirro at CPAC.
Exactly. And our mission, like always, is to go through this material together, pull out the core arguments, the key
And
examples.
then really understand the specific viewpoint being put forward in these remarks.
Right. Think of it as getting a clear picture of the ideas contained within the source itself, seeing how they're presented without, getting lost in anything else.
And this definitely sets a strong tone right from the get-go.
Hmm.
The speaker opens by saying she's not happy most of the time. It immediately establishes this context of uh, discontent, framing the discussion within that CPAC environment.
And she wastes absolutely no time getting to what she sees as the central issue. Her core claim, right up front, is that illegals with criminal records in some states have even more rights and protections than American citizens.
And she links that idea directly straight away to the concept of sanctuary cities.
What's interesting, I think, is how she immediately tries to elevate this. It's not just policy for her.
No, she argues it's fundamental. She connects this issue straight to the Constitution, to national security.
And to what she defines as the government's primary duty, the protection and safety of its citizens.
Right. She even uses that phrase law and order, noting its, language often associated with President Trump.
So right from the jump, she's positioning this not just as like a policy disagreement, but as a foundational issue: constitutional duty, public safety.
And she leans heavily on her background to build credibility. She mentions, what, over 3 decades?
Yeah, prosecutor, judge, district attorney.
Yes. And she describes that whole career as a battlefield. She frames her work as this fight, good and evil.
Her focus, she says, was always fighting for victims harmed for no reason, emphasizing the criminal makes the choice to victimize.
And she also mentions her own history, getting conservative endorsements in her past elections. So she connects her professional history directly to her political alignment there.
Okay, so that professional background, framing it as fighting for victims, that's clearly intended to give weight to her arguments, right?
Absolutely. Authority.
Now, moving from her personal framing, she gets into what she presents as the um, constitutional basis for her view. Article 1, Section 8, Subdivision 4.
And her interpretation of this section is, well, it's key to her whole argument. She states it entrusts to the federal legislative branch the power to regulate citizenship.
So within the argument she's making in this source, that point is the foundation for why she believes the federal government, not local authorities, should have the primary control over immigration stuff.
And then she contrasts this federal power with what she claims progressive mayors are doing.
And what she claims they're doing, according to this source, is actively working to protect illegal criminals.
She asserts they're telling local police not to cooperate with federal authorities like ICE.
Right, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. She specifically mentions police being told not to share info or honor requests like detainer warrants.
Those are the requests from ICE for local law enforcement to hold someone they think might be deportable.
And she argues this non-cooperation, it results in these individuals being able to roam freely among us. That's her phrasing.
So this really highlights a central tension she's presenting in the source.
Yeah.
This conflict between federal immigration enforcement and local policies, especially around these non-cooperation rules in sanctuary cities.
And to show the alleged real-world consequences of this, the source includes a very detailed, very emotional anecdote: the story of Kate.
Yeah, this story is clearly, it's used for powerful emotional impact.
Definitely. The speaker describes Kate being shot, killed, while walking with her father on a pier. And the person who did it, she identifies as a criminal illegal alien who had no right whatsoever to be there. Her words.
And the source gives these really specific, stark details about the perpetrator's history, as presented by the speaker. Ordered deported at least 5 times.
Convicted of at least 7 felonies, making him a career criminal, she says, and using an illegal weapon.
And she recounts Kate's alleged final moments, saying she begged for her father's help, but claiming there was no help for Kate.
Because, as the speaker puts it, all the protections are now in place for her killer. That's a direct quote from the source.
The narrative keeps going with more specifics on the perpetrator's background. Age 19, from Central America, crossed illegally.
And allegedly admitted to being an MS-13 gang member.
Right. And according to the source, she claims the Obama administration let him into the country despite this history.
And despite prior deportation orders and many convictions, she claims Mayor de Blasio in New York City believed he needed protection.
And here's the critical link she makes to sanctuary policies in the story, the claim that local police ignored IC and the federal request to hold him.
The alleged result, according to the speaker, he wanders freely, posing a risk of MS-13 activities. She even mentions brutal initiation rituals as examples.
So this whole anecdote, it really serves as the central piece of evidence within the source to illustrate the danger she alleges comes from sanctuary policies.
Okay, so after presenting that really impactful story, the speaker then pivots a bit. She addresses potential counterarguments about sanctuary cities.
Yeah, she clarifies her focus isn't immigrants generally. She acknowledges all of us are immigrants unless you're a Native American.
But she's very specific in her target: sanctuary cities that are asylums for criminal illegals.
And she directly takes on the argument that holding people for ICE pickup damages police-immigrant relations. She just says, in the source, that argument is wrong.
And she makes this counterclaim that, according to her view in the source, an illegal victim is actually more afraid of the other illegal with sanctuary than they are of the police.
Which is interesting, right? It attempts to flip a common argument for sanctuary cities, suggesting the policy creates a different kind of fear within immigrant communities, from her perspective.
So, as an alternative mechanism, the speaker points to the U visa.
Yes, she presents the U visa as an existing law passed by Congress, says she used it many times in her career.
And she uses it as proof, saying, we don't need sanctuary cities.
She describes it as this way, where if someone cooperates with law enforcement, like a victim or a witness, they can get this visa. It protects them and their family.
So her argument, as presented, is that this existing legal path allows for cooperation and safety for immigrants without needing sanctuary policies, which she argues put whole cities at risk.
And she connects this discussion to actions taken at the federal level, specifically under the Trump administration. She highlights an executive order from his first 30 days.
Right. And the source details the priorities of that order.
Yeah, deporting criminal illegals, people previously ordered deported.
And those who abuse our money and welfare programs.
And then she talks about a potential consequence for local areas that don't cooperate with federal immigration enforcement.
The risk of losing federal grant money.
Exactly. Funds, she notes, that are used for things like local police and child protection.
And her interpretation of this potential consequence, it leads to fewer cops and less protection for American citizens in those sanctuary cities.
So she connects the local policy choice directly to potentially fewer safety resources locally.
It underscores the potential trade-offs, as she presents them in the source, for cities adopting these policies risking federal funds that support local safety.
And finally, the source concludes with a pretty strong critique of the left and a clear call to action.
Yeah, she makes several claims about the left.
Yeah.
Says they march, spew allegations of hatred, demonize our president.
Are ignorant of the facts and the law, and fundamentally don't care about American citizens. That's her claim in the source.
And she draws this really sharp line between showing compassion for those who come here to work versus those who are a danger to the rest of us.
The call to action is quite forceful. She urges people to demand an end to what she calls criminal enclaves, to take the country back.
Stop listening to the nonsense that the left is spewing. Protect the law-abiding citizens. Demand law and order.
And she restates her core principle. Government's first duty is citizen protection. And sanctuaries, in her view, mean innocent Americans become subject to random acts of violence and death.
And she doesn't just make general calls. She directly challenges mayors. New York, Chicago, LA, DC.
Poses direct questions to them, like, at what point do we stop the violence and the killings? Are they willing to risk citizens to protect illegal criminals? Is risking federal police money acceptable?
Right. And the source wraps up by rejecting what she calls sanctimonious condescension about kindness or Christianity in this context.
Instead, she calls for a return to the America the founders intended. Be morally right, not politically correct.
So looking back at this deep dive into the source material, we've seen how the speaker constructs her argument. Starts with that framing of discontent, the core assertion about criminal illegal immigrants in sanctuary cities.
Builds credibility through her professional history, cites that constitutional basis for federal authority.
Uses that really emotional, detailed anecdote Kate story to illustrate the alleged consequences.
Tries to counter arguments for sanctuary cities, proposes the U visa as an alternative,
Highlights actions and potential consequences under the Trump administration.
and concludes with that forceful critique and call to action focused on citizen protection and law and order.
It's definitely a perspective presented with clear intent and very specific examples within this source.
It's a very specific, consistently argued viewpoint based on the material provided, yeah.
Thinking about the way this viewpoint is constructed and presented,
Hmm.
what does it make you consider about the different types of arguments, legal, personal, emotional, that get used when debating complex issues like immigration policy? Or maybe how different sources choose to zero in on certain details and anecdotes to make their case?